All right, so you hear about interest rates all the time, right? But what are they really? Well, when you boil it all down, it's pretty simple. We're talking about the price of money itself.
Okay, I know that sounds a little dramatic, but for centuries, a lot of people thought that the very act of earning money from money, well, they saw it as predatory. It's a question that really gets to the heart of how we even think about finance. So, how do we see it today?
In our modern economy, we don't really see interest as evil, we just see it as a price. It's like this: you get wages for your labor, right? You pay rent to use a piece of property. In the exact same way, interest is just the price you pay to rent someone else's money, whether you're taking out a car loan in Michigan or getting a mortgage for a house down in Texas.
Okay, so to get how that price is actually set, we need to go behind the curtain. Let's step inside what you could call the control room of the US economy. And in here, you're going to find what I call the holy trinity of financial news, these three big forces that are always dancing around each other.
So, first up, you've got inflation, which is basically just how fast your everyday costs are going up. Then there's the federal funds rate. Think of this as the master interest rate that influences pretty much everything from your credit card to your car loan. And finally, who's pulling the levers? That's the Fed, America's central bank. And trust me, these three are totally linked at the hip. And this all points to something kind of unique about the US economy. A lot of other countries are constantly worried about their currency's exchange rate. But here in the US, we're obsessed with something else: purchasing power. At the end of the day, the only question that matters is, what can your dollar actually buy? And back in June of 2022, the answer to that question was, well, not nearly as much as it used to. Inflation hit this insane peak of 9.1%. I mean, that number sent absolute shockwaves through the system because it meant our purchasing power was just dissolving and fast. So the Fed had to do something. But what is their job anyway? Well, the Fed has this thing called a dual mandate. They're basically trying to juggle two big goals at the same time. One, keep as many Americans employed as possible, and two, keep prices stable. For them, stable means a 2% inflation target. And a lot of the time, those two goals are pushing in opposite directions. It's a constant tightrope walk. So how do they manage this balancing act? They basically act like a thermostat for the economy. If things are getting too hot, everyone's spending like crazy, prices are just skyrocketing, the Fed cranks up the interest rates. That makes it more expensive to borrow money for everyone, from families to big businesses. So people spend less and things cool down. But on the flip side, if the economy stalls out and we're heading into a recession, the Fed will slash those rates, sometimes close to zero, to get the engine running again. So that's the high-level theory. But how does a decision made in Washington, D.C. actually hit you? Let's bring this right down to your kitchen table. All right, so here's a little puzzle for you. The Fed raises rates, which makes a car loan way more expensive. So why on earth would a family, say in Ohio, look at a brand new Ford F-150 and decide, yeah, let's do it, now's the time to buy? It just doesn't seem to make sense, does it?
The answer? It's all about psychology. It comes down to something called consumer confidence. See, if that family believes that inflation is going to make that same truck cost thousands more next year, they're going to buy it today, even if the interest rate is higher. And this is exactly why inflation can get so sticky. If people don't believe the Fed has it under control, they just keep on spending. And that collective belief, man, it's a powerful thing. It can fuel all sorts of other economic cycles that are just as tough to break.
I mean, take the wage price spiral, for example. Let's just walk through how this works. Okay, step one. A state, let's say California or New York, raises its minimum wage. Sounds great, right? So now low-wage workers have more cash in their pockets and demand for stuff goes up. But then, step three, businesses have to raise their prices to cover their new, higher labor costs. And just like that, step four, that original pay raise gets completely eaten up by a higher cost of living. It's this super frustrating loop. Okay, let's zoom in a bit. We've talked about the big national economy, but now let's talk about your personal economy. We're going to break down a couple of key terms you see on your bank statements that are tied directly to everything we've been discussing.
This right here shows one of the most critical concepts for anyone who saves money: the difference between nominal and real interest. So look at scenario A. Your savings account is paying you 4.5%. Not bad, but inflation is at 3.5%. That means your real return, what you're actually gaining in purchasing power, is just 1%. Now look at scenario B. Your interest rate is the exact same, 4.5%, but inflation has jumped to 5.5%. You are now losing 1% of your money's value just by letting it sit in the bank. And this all leads us to what some people, including Warren Buffett, have called the eighth wonder of the world: compound interest. The quote says it all. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. It's an unbelievably powerful force for building wealth.
So the big question is, how do you get this working for you instead of against you? Well, for most Americans, the answer lies in retirement accounts, like a 401k or an IRA. By investing in the broad stock market, something like the S&P 500, your returns start to compound on themselves year after year for decades. It becomes this incredible engine for building real wealth. All right, so we've been focused pretty heavily on the US, but these decisions the Fed makes don't just happen in a bubble. A choice made in Washington, D.C. creates ripples that are felt literally all over the world. So when the Fed jacks up interest rates, it makes holding US dollars a lot more attractive. This makes the dollar stronger against other big currencies like the euro or the yen. Now that's fantastic if you're an American about to take a trip to Europe, but it makes American products way more expensive for other countries to buy. And here's the really critical part. For countries that have a lot of debt that's priced in US dollars, it suddenly becomes much, much harder to pay it back. And that's not just a line on a spreadsheet. For a developing nation, this can literally trigger a massive financial crisis. So when you put this all together, it's kind of like the economy is a giant swimming pool, and the Fed's job is really just to add or remove some water, in this case, money, to keep the temperature just right. Not too hot, but not too cold either. And that really leaves us with one last big question to chew on. Every single time the Fed tweaks that dial, every time the price of money changes, someone wins and someone loses. It could be savers versus borrowers, importers versus exporters, the rich versus the poor. So the real question we have to ask is, when that price changes, who's the one that really ends up paying it?